Hello, beautiful women, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us for another Feminine Network Masterclass session. If this is your first time watching, our masterclasses are free online learning sessions where women from our wider community share their knowledge, wisdom, passions, and lived experience with us. They're designed to be supportive, practical, and nourishing, a space where we can learn from one another and walk away with something useful for our life, business, or personal growth. Today's session is Living a Cycle-Led Life with the beautiful Bianca Jade from the Goddess Temple Brisbane. This is such an important conversation for women because so many of us have been taught to live in a way that asks us to be constantly productive, constantly available, and constantly pushing through. But our energies, creativities, our bodies and capacity don't move in straight lines. They move in cycles. And in this session, Bianca guides us into a deeper understanding of what it means to live in alignment with our natural rhythms, whether that's through our monthly cycle, our inner seasons, our intuition, or the life stage we're currently moving through. Bianca is a Brisbane-based author, a ceremonial guide, and founder of the Goddess Temple in Milton. She supports women through spiritual journeys, life transitions, and personal transformation, and her work is deeply rooted in the feminine embodiment, in remembrance, in community, and the long story of the feminine. I'm really honoured to share this conversation with you today, and I hope it gives you a beautiful moment to pause, to reflect, and listen a little more deeply to your own rhythm. Let's begin. Welcome, Bianca.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Okay, everyone, just making sure you can see my screen and you can hear me well. Okay, amazing. Welcome, welcome. So I wanted to just bring us into the space from wherever you're watching, if you're watching the recording or if you're in the room. Just wanted to take a moment to bring us into the space. So inviting you to put one hand on your heart and one hand on your womb space. Closing down the eyes if that feels aligned and comfortable. And just really arriving into the space. And taking a really deep breath through the nose and out through the mouth. You might like to sigh and feeling the shoulders drop. And then one more deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just holding yourself in gratitude for being here, for showing up to this talk, for showing up for yourself, showing up for me and Leah. We appreciate you. And opening up the eyes again. And so today I'm going to be talking about living a cycle-led life. And this is an invitation to remember that our cycles are actually our inner compass and that they influence our energy and our emotions, our creativity, our relationships, and our way of moving through this world. And so hopefully by the end of this, you will gain some more information and some insight about how to work with your body and not against it. And so, as Leah mentioned, my name is Bianca. I'm an author, ceremonial guide, passionate about reviving the sacred feminine, both within and around us, through reconnecting women to the wisdom of their bodies, their cycles, nature, and rites of passage. I've written a book, Soul Truth, which was really my kind of pre where I am now, coming out of the corporate world and traveling and meeting myself. And now I'm working on a new novel called Reclaim Your Power, which is around learning how to work with your sacred feminine and the divine feminine to awaken the intelligence from within. And I'll share a little bit about that story. So I was very lucky recently to get asked by Mamma Mia magazine to share my story. And as you know, with these kind of publications, they want to be a little bit of clickbaity. So the title of the article was that I was 35 when I realized I spent decades ignoring my own body. I'm nearly 40 now. I started bleeding when I was 12, I think. And so that was a long time of my life where I was completely disconnected from my body. I think the typical way that we move through this life, especially if we were born in, 70s, 80s, 90s, earlier, is that we kind of go through this life not very much connected to the wisdom of our bodies. I remember being on a contraceptive pill when I was about, I don't know, 16, and then in my 20s just completely saw my cycle as a burden. It was just non-existent. It was just kind of like, yep, this thing comes around every month and don't really, I'm too busy doing other things. And so, yeah, my journey was climbing the corporate ladder. I was deep in productivity culture, which I can know that many women that come into my field can relate. We've all been there. We probably sometimes are still there in this very linear, masculine, sort of leaning society. And then what happened was I experienced nervous system exhaustion. I burnt out. I was suffering from intense anxiety, depression. And so that really became the catalyst for me to do something quite radical at the time, which was quit my job and travel the world for, probably 2 years. And that started a deep unraveling, what I like to call, of coming back to myself. And it wasn't until I was 35, I remember the moment almost that I was in just in the studio apartment. I was living in Malta at the time. And I think I'd honestly felt my womb for the first time in that moment, and I was 35. It was like I had taken the chaos away and I had reconnected with myself, and it was almost like I was like, "Oh, this body is a giver of life. This body is something that is so intelligent. This womb, it is something that has birthed all life into creation. I hadn't had children. I don't have children because at that point I was so disconnected from my femininity. I was a bit like, well, I'm not going to have children, so don't really want to think about that. And so in that moment, it was almost like this light bulb came on. What have I been missing here? What have I been ignoring? And so in the past 5 years, it's been a journey back to that, back to the womb, back to my femininity, and living in my most authentic expression as a woman. Now, there are reasons why I was disconnected from my body for the pretty much 20 years. And those reasons are very much societal. If we look at the rhetoric that is fed to us from everywhere around our cycles, around our bodies, it's words like premenstrual syndrome. Like a syndrome isn't, it's not a syndrome. It's basically a normal human function of for our bodies that has happened since time began. Dysfunction, you know, mood swings, hormonal imbalances. And when we start to kind of identify those sort of negative connotations with our body, we start to want to fix something that is actually not inherently broken. And so that's kind of been our collective understanding of our own bodies for for not really our fault. It's just that this is the world that we are living in and that we have lived in. I talked a little bit about the education that I received when I first, when I went through puberty, and I'm pretty sure it was from a male PE teacher who told me about but maybe about how babies are made, and then that was it. It wasn't sort of acknowledged around, well, actually, your body is a very intelligent system that is signaling you every single month. None of that was really incorporated into our our teaching. And I could probably say this, I can't speak for everybody, but at least the women that have come through my field and who enter my ceremonies and who enter my circles, it's the same story until it isn't, until we start to change things. And so to continue on to that, there's nothing wrong with you. You are trying to live cyclically inside a linear culture that is designed for men. It, the productivity, the waking up, working 9 to 5, the not getting any sunlight in an office, the not having any consideration for where you are at on your cycle. I remember being in corporate, probably would have been bleeding in a boardroom. Like, I don't even remember at that time. I was so disconnected because it was just so what I had to do. And so when we come back to our bodies and ourselves and understanding that we are cyclical beings, and first and foremost, we bring this to the front of the way that we exist in the world, we start to work with our bodies and rather than against them. And I just wanted to also take a moment to offer ourselves so much loving compassion for the times that we had to exist so very disconnected from our bodies because nobody taught us, nobody told us we were sacred. There weren't any manuals for this. It was just sort of like jump in the deep end and try and swim and then wondering why things feel so unaligned. And it's because we weren't guided. And so just offering loving compassion for ourselves at that time because we can't change that story for us, but we can certainly now change how we will move forward with our cycles. And just also noting for the women who are watching this or here that don't still bleed every month, you are wise women now. You've entered the wise women phase in your life, which is beautiful. You're sort of in this collective luteal phase where you don't take shit from no one anymore and you are, you're starting to know who you are. And so that is a beautiful phase. And so just also knowing that you can work with the moon cycles. I'll talk a little bit to the work of Jane Hardwick Collins, who has been one of my main mentors in this space. But you can work with the moon cycles, the seasonal cycles, the earth. It's really about seeing yourself as a mirror to the earth and to knowing yourself as a cyclical being and knowing that even if you are going through intense hormonal changes, looking at that as messages that perhaps you have been ignoring for the time from the time that you were in your maiden and mother, because it's not so much as, in the previous slide talking about imbalance, it's more communication. So when we start to shift the language, we go from premenstrual syndrome to premenstrual awareness. We go from hormonal imbalance to hormonal communication. We go from mood swings to emotional fluctuation. We use words like signals, inner knowing, non-linear ways of being. We look at our cycles or the things that come up in the luteal phase, which I'll talk a bit more in the next few slides, as messages. So how can we look to our body and our cycle as messages, as if it's coming from the most innate wisdom that has ever been since time began? And now, so some of the things that I teach in my ceremonies, and also a beautiful way that we can look to the seasons of our cycle is just that, the seasons. So comparing our bleed, our menstruation with winter. So a time of reflection, a time of going inwards, a time of stillness, a time of deep listening, a time of withdrawal. And then coming into the spring, feeling creative, feeling like it's new beginnings. You can also liken this to the new moon. the energy of creation, because that's actually also what's happening in your body. The egg is preparing, you're preparing for life, you're bringing in this creation energy. And so whether or not you choose at this time to have a child or you don't, you still are accessing life force creation power at this time. And so I don't know if anyone can relate, but sometimes when I've come into spring and especially going into summer, going into ovulation, I can take on the world. I mean, Leah, I feel like you would definitely be getting a lot done in ovulation. And so, we can kind of see how, when we notice our bodies, we can see how there are messages coming through. And then going back into autumn after ovulation finishes and hormones are changing again, it comes to these concepts of discernment, truth. Truth is a really huge one because you might become annoyed by something at this time. You might feel agitated. Why? What is the thing that is coming up that is asking to be seen? What is the thing that you've just pushed down? Who is mirroring you at this time, and what is actually coming forth in truth? Now, women are very intuitive beings. If there is something that you have not into that you have ignored, then this is the time it's probably going to come to the surface. In spring and summer, follicular ovulation, yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy creating. In autumn luteal phase, it's going to come back up. It's going to ask to be witnessed. And so these are where we get a bit muddled up with the what's wrong with me? Why am I being overly emotional? No, it's a message coming through for you to look into truth. And so what I think is important during luteal time is that you feel supported. Maybe it's a time that you want to spend more time with your close friends, a time that you want to do some seasonal rituals of letting go. I know, Sienna, you were talking about the winter solstice coming up. You can look at luteal as potentially the like autumn equinox. What are we letting go of to come into the new? And so really kind of using the seasons as a way to align with what's going on with your body and connect with your cycle can bring really beautiful wisdom for you. Um,
I love that. I think when we first met, Bianca, I was in my autumn and I said to you, that was how our conversation got started because I was looking at the cake cabinet desperately looking for some sort of sweet treat. And I said to you, I'm really tired right now and feeling a bit irritated. And I said to you, I know it's because my menstrual cycle's coming up. And you were like, oh, fabulous, someone that gets it. But I've never really thought of it as truth. And I know I get a lot more irritated with my family and my partner around that time. And now that you have said that, I can see so clearly it's because I don't have where I'm normally busy and have that excess energy in my spring, summer to deal with their needs and wants. When I'm in that autumn stage, I want my needs and wants to be validated and honored, and they don't do that. So therefore, I get agitated at them because of that, because I'm not acknowledging my truth to them and they're not fulfilling what I need from them in return. So yeah, I've honestly never heard it put like that before. I love it.
oh, thank you. Yeah, and it's not an easy time, right, when we want to express truth and it's not being reflected at us. So again, like some things to really work with this discernment, maybe taking time away. Why not? Why not take an autumn vacation? But so I've put this app here. So speaking to Jane Hardwick Collins, who's a really beautiful elder in the community who talks to rite of passage. And anyhow, she has I wouldn't call it a tracking app because with the tracking apps, they can get you so far, but I think your own body's wisdom is is the loudest for you. But anyhow, it's a beautiful app. It talks to the different seasons. So here we've got, maiden, mother, crone, marga. I mean, I sort of like to go maiden, mother, wise woman, and some of the other ways that you can sort of connect in with either the moon cycles or the seasonal cycles for your own body. So I think that's a free app anyhow, available on Apple and Android. And so, talking to just a few things that you can do. So, as we were saying, Leah, understanding the frustration, but sort of planning your life around your cycle. So, I never did this. I honestly never did this until probably about only a year ago. I really started to, especially when I'd had events on. Now, well, yeah, now that I run an event space and I'm running regular events, I look and I say, okay, well, what kind of energy am I needing to require for this? Is there any way that I can align this with my cycle? And sometimes not always possible. I originally aligned this for ovulation, but then I had a really short cycle randomly. And so it changed a bit. But I was like, it's a room full of women. I could do this in my luteal phase. It's all good. I feel supported. Um, and then obviously social events. Difficult conversations is an interesting one. And sometimes I feel like when it's got to come out, it's got to come out. So, it's maybe if you wanted to even think as far as that, you could think about having these conversations in during ovulation phase. And then menstruation, really allowing more space for rest. I cannot believe right now that I used to do so much on my bleed. Like, I just think back and I mean, bless everyone that still does this because no doubt there are sports players and everyone. And, again, we are existing inside a structure not designed for our cyclical ways of being. But if you can, having that time to really go inwards and really allow yourself to have the inner winter. And it's a thought, it's just a consideration, a thought, hey, maybe this month I won't organize myself to be social. Maybe I will just move that event if I can. And then also prioritizing some practices. If we look at everything as a whole, coming back to seeing your body as a source of wisdom, prioritizing embodiment practices is so important. Anything that can get you out of the mind and into the body, because the feminine is flow. She flows, she peaks, she is dance. And so how to engage in things in your life that are working for you. Now, I to talk to business, which is sort of what this is aligning with. I have honestly found, and I think we talked to this, Leah, that when I can flow and when I can allow myself to be in that state of self-care and alignment with my body, things do go well in my business. It's when I am really trying too hard, working out of alignment, pushing, it seems that it's like it's just not happening. And then sometimes say, you know what, I'm just going to take a complete self-care day. And then somehow I'll get a client or a ticket sales. So there's something in that, not so much to work against your natural way of being and just be totally okay that if you want to give yourself so much self-care during your bleed or when you're in your inner winter, it's not that things aren't moving. You don't have to be constantly productive. That is just a product of what we have been told in a society that was not designed for our way of being. And so I just love this quote, which was that tracking and being aware of your cycle is the greatest act of self-care that you can give yourself. And unlike joining a gym, starting a diet, or quitting coffee, it requires very little effort. Maisie Hill wrote Period Power. It's a wonderful book if you can get your hands on it. Talks a lot to our cycles and her perspective around, how we can connect deeper with ourselves. And yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to have a book on their shelves that's about periods? I feel like that's what needs to be in every school, I think. Um, and so this is me a long time ago, even longer before I was disconnected, when I used to, when I had my bar era. And so I just want to talk to the beginning. So as you know, I'm a ceremonial guide. I run menarche ceremonies for young girls at their first bleed. And when the mothers and daughters come into my ceremony, it's the mothers who really say, I wish that I had this when I was younger. Because when we're not initiated into the wisdom of our cycles from a young age, our blood, our period, it becomes associated with shame, confusion, inconvenience. That was a massive one for me. It was always an inconvenience, always wanting to somehow put it away, not work with it, have a pill, have this, have that. And what that does is it strips me away from my body's wisdom. I don't know what is really going on. I can't listen to the messages that are coming through if I'm just pretending that they're not there. And so, for yourself, maybe not after this, if you wanted to take some time, because sometimes when we ask ourselves this question, how did you feel when you bled for the first time? It can bring up a lot of uncomfortable feelings. And so, to sit with that and to almost imagine that you're with that young version of you and you're just hugging her and saying, hey, it's okay. Like you are so blessed. You are so sacred. Just being with her for a moment, if it was a challenging time for you, perhaps you one of the lucky ones where, your mother really honored you during that time. Perhaps you even were so lucky to have a ceremony, which would be so beautiful. Um, but just remembering that, it wasn't our fault that we had carried this shame. And to also note that we could be carrying ancestral shame because no doubt we're here talking about this now, but our mothers, grandmothers, great grandmothers weren't having these conversations. Somewhere along the line, we were stripped of the ability to be able to talk about this with a kind of reverence for the feminine. And so this is why I'm really passionate about the work that I do now. I run menarche ceremonies, which menarche is just more of the scientific name given to young girls when they get their period for the first time. And mothers and daughters come into these ceremonies with the intention to honor the young woman, to say, this is a celebration for you. This is not something to be ashamed of. This is not something to feel that you have to hide. And it's really beautiful to watch young women get excited about it and feel as though at least they're guided. The inspiration that I had for holding these ceremonies actually came from a book that I read called The Red Tent. Now, you may have heard of the red tent has kind of become this word that's used as women gather. But the author, actually, it's a historical fiction novel. She talks to a character from the Christian Bible as if she wanted to expand on her story. What was life like for her back then? What was she doing? And she talks to this concept of women would gather at this time. They would gather at the time of bleed. They would gather at the time of pregnancy. It was like we all existed in this red tent where we saw one another, held one another in our shared experiences. It might have been away from the men, but it wasn't hidden the way that it is hidden now. We were together, we held one another, and there was no shame, no embarrassment. And so I think in a sense what I'm doing and what many women around the world are doing is bringing back this concept of ceremony and this togetherness around the shared experience that it is to be a woman, to remember how powerful it is to be a woman, how much we have a wisdom in our body, that we have the power to birth life into existence. That is such a beautiful thing, and it's sort of like I just wish every young girl would know that no one to tell them otherwise about their body's wisdom, their intuitive wisdom, and their connection to themselves and to all that's around. And so many of the women that come to my ceremonies say, as I said, I wish I had this when I got my period for the first time. I wish I had this celebration. I wish I had this knowledge. And the good thing is that now we do. So now is the time to reclaim that connection to our body, reclaim our power as women, no matter what phase of womanhood you're in, whether you're young, maiden, mother, wise woman, it is a time of reclamation. And so I hope that you were able to absorb some of that wisdom and walk away from this listening to your own body, in becoming in tune with your cycles, giving yourself that loving compassion if you are still in some way disconnected, and know that it's a journey and it doesn't have to be perfect, and that you pick up wisdom along the way. But when you can know these things and you can know that there is another way, then you are able to take that knowledge and take it to where life will be taking you. So if you'd like to find out more about the work that I do, if you're in Brisbane, I run the Goddess Temple Brisbane. I hold different kinds of ceremonies there. If you're a mother whose daughter is approaching her first bleed, then please get in touch. Yeah, it's such an honor now to hold ceremony, because it's something that I would have wanted, and I think oftentimes when we go into business, or when we provide an offering to the community, it comes from something that we would have wanted to provide for ourselves.
Thank you so much, Bianca. I don't know, and welcome Doreen and Sylvia. Apologies, we've had a few technical issues with getting on today. There was the wrong link in the second email that went out. I know when I'm planning my events, because my work can be public facing and sometimes it's hard. You have to show up and you have to be there in person. But if that happens for myself, I know to not plan any social events on top of it. So in my calendar, I have my menstrual cycle fully mapped out in different color codes so that I know, and I just adjust it as it comes on, and I try to forward plan utilizing that. Is there things that you might suggest that women do in order to be able to fully acknowledge their cycles and where they are? And I was exactly the same. When I was younger, I thought of my period as an inconvenience. I was terrible at taking pills, so I got injections, which I had a really bad reaction to. I had rods put in my arms after I'd had my children, because it took me quite a while to get pregnant. And then once I'd finished having children, I got the rods put in because I didn't want to have any more. And that caused me to have 4 months of straight bleeding, to the point where I was I was pretty much unconscious in the bath from so much blood loss. And it was only after that that I went, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. And it took a long time for me to get back into the rhythm of it, because I saw my bleed as this inconvenience to be pushed and hidden and managed in a way that was very masculine, as opposed to honored in the way of the feminine. And it's not my mum's fault and it's not her mum's fault. It's just the way it always was. Like, you just keep it hidden, you don't acknowledge it. And I never even knew when my mum had her period. So with my daughter, I try to give her hot water bottles and love and acknowledge and tell my sons, like, she's going to be feeling this. So we want to be extra loving towards her at this point in her life. But yeah, I'd be really interested if anyone has any questions or just comments about how they acknowledge their cycle, and do they track it? Do they know that there are going to be days when they're feeling, or periods in there where they're going to be feeling a little quieter and more introspective, and do they honor those periods? So I'll open up the floor if anyone has any questions or comments for Bianca. Nope, I can't see anyone's
Uh,
faces. So yeah.
I'd just like to also add to what you were saying just briefly, just to recognize that our medical system is so deeply pathologized and so deeply not in alignment with the fact that every single woman on this planet has a unique body and their own body's wisdom is so much more intelligent than to be able to go to somebody and say, "What's wrong with me?" And I
Yes.
think when we do that, and I don't discount the medical system for all that it has given us, but when we give our power away in that sense, and I'm the same, I had the Mirena because I went into a GP and they were like, I think that you should get this. And
Mm.
now with hindsight, I feel like, how is it like I was just so kind of blind in that of just saying, yeah, okay, sure, that sounds good. It will get rid of my inconvenient period. Not
Mm.
realizing that that inconvenient period was something that could be telling me what is going on with my body every single month. And so this is the kind of unlearning that we're invited into because of the just because of the way that the medical system has pathologized the feminine experience.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a bit challenging sometimes because you think, well, these are the people that I was supposed to be trusting, when deeply I think that the invitation for women is to trust ourselves first and foremost. And then, if our self says, yeah, I think you need to go and like get medical support, okay. But is it yourself first or is it them first? Because the feminine wisdom and the wisdom of your body, and as we were talking earlier about the luteal phase and things that are coming up, it's coming up from a place of truth. Are we listening?
Definitely. And your body needs to have that time to rest. I refer it back to like our earth. If we don't have winter, then the earth doesn't have enough energy to produce in spring. If it doesn't go through those natural cycles of withdrawing, of having that time to rest, so that it has the strength to be reborn and to produce. When we try to go, go, go and live in perpetual summer, all that we end up with is burnt out, exhausted, not trusting of ourselves, and our bodies are just so depleted. That's you see that with women who are still trying to live in that linear way, that they haven't quite had that realization yet that there is another way. And I'll speak to them and they'll be like, oh, I'm so tired all the time, or they're living on caffeine to wake them up, alcohol to level them out, and sugar in the middle of the day to get them through, because they're not listening to what they need each day. One of the
Mm.
activities that I have my students do is to track their cycle, not just over a moon cycle, but also over their solar cycle throughout the day, so they can see how they are feeling at each point of the day, whether that's in the morning when they wake up, do they have more energy at that time, or are they still, do they take longer to get going? And then are they more energized in the middle of the day or the afternoon? So that they can plan their days and their months out in accordance to their particular energy levels. And that only happens when we take the time to be aware. I think we've got a
Yeah,
question.
then.
So there's a question in the chat from Doreen. She's reading a book on the power of a parent's blessing by Craig Hill, and he mentions the same. And he mentions the same thing regarding different stages of a child's life to receive a blessing impartation from father to son, mother to daughter, to empower and prosper them, especially from puberty to adult. So she totally agrees with what you've shared. Thank you, Bianca. Hi, Doreen. Nice to see you, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
That's
Mm.
okay. Thank you for sharing too, Bianca. I'm very intrigued about the Red Tent book now. I'm just gonna look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, to understand more about it. So yeah, thank you for sharing,
It's
Bianca.
such a beautiful book. And, it's sort
Mm,
of what, to your point, like we looked to our elders. Every culture would look to their elders for the knowledge. But
yeah.
then now we're looking to the medical system, some Instagram influencer,
Yeah.
somebody that's telling, and it's sort of like to what you were saying about the blessings of the mother to daughter. And, there's so much, even for me, as somebody who is still in my mother archetype, who is not a wise woman, I will look to my elders for their knowledge.
Mm,
And I think we have an opportunity to come back to that because they're the ones that know. They're the ones that have been through it.
mm,
So,
yeah, thank
Thank you so much, Bianca, for sharing your wisdom with us today. This has been such a beautiful reminder that we were never meant to move through life, business, creativity, or leadership in one straight line. Our energy changes, our capacity changes, our bodies speak to us, and our intuition speaks to us. And when we begin to listen rather than pushing through constantly, something really powerful begins to shift. I hope this masterclass has given you a new way to look at your own rhythm, your own cycles, and the season of life you're currently moving through. If this conversation has stirred something in you, I encourage you to take a little time after this to reflect on what stood out, what your body already knew, and what you might begin to honor differently from here. You can learn more about Bianca and her beautiful work through her Bloom Book profile, and her links are shared with this replay. And if you'd love to keep learning from the women in our community, you can explore more free masterclass sessions through the Feminine Network. Thank you all so much for being with us here today. With much love, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.